Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome in and welcome back to the 60 feet 6 inches LSU podcast. As always, thank you all for joining me. In this episode, I will briefly recap the Nicholls State game, but stay tuned as I am joined by a special guest to help me break down another top 10 SEC showdown this weekend as LSU travels to Columbia, South Carolina to face the Gamecocks. I will also give you my three keys to the weekend, who makes the Get Right, Stay Right list, and then finally, my series prediction. As always, you can find the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other major audio platforms. Make sure to check out the YouTube channel for all the content. Subscribe to that channel. Drop me any comments that you would like. And also hit that notifications bell and subscribe to the Twitter channel. For those that don't know, the Twitter channel is at 60FT6IN LSU Pod. If you missed the last episode, you missed a live stream as they went live with Stephen Miller and then Hunt Palmer from ESPN Radio 104.5 here in Baton Rouge, as we discussed the LSU versus Tennessee series as the Tigers took 2 out of 3 in Baton Rouge from the Vols. As always, that podcast is linked on the Twitter account in either podcast or YouTube versions. So let's get right into it. LSU defeats Nicholls tonight, 12-2. And my biggest question going into this game is, who would start this game? Would it be Christian Little, or would you see Thatcher Hurd get a chance to start, get a couple innings under his belt, and move on to South Carolina? Well, Christian Little started this game, and I thought he threw well. He K'd the side in the first inning, but then in the second inning, he gives up a 2-out walk with a stolen base, and then a single scores the run. But all in all, Christian Little did well. He came in, he did his job, and he should be raring to go for this weekend. Will we see him start? Who knows? But I think it's probably a better than 50% chance we see Little start the third game against South Carolina. Following Little, it was a litany of pitchers. You saw Helmers came in. He threw one inning with 2 Ks, so it's good to see him get out there and get some mound time. Then Gavin Guidry came in and worked out of a jam. Well, he was put in with runners on base. He got out of that jam with a strikeout, and then he gets 3 Ks on the night for himself. Then you saw Thatcher Hurd came in, and he worked all out of the stretch, even when nobody was on base. And you saw him for the first time that I can remember really featuring a over the top curveball, and he threw a lot of off speed pitches tonight. But it was a good outing, I guess. We'll just take some positives from it. And if you're hurt, I think you just got to build upon this outing. He gave up 2 tough luck singles, one on a changeup and one on a slider. They're both good pitches. Then a walk and a sacrifice fly to give up a run, and then with bases loaded, he gets a strikeout. So all in all, if Thatcher Hurd, he did fine. Just got to build on that, continue to fix whatever mechanical issues may be going on, and just draw a lot of confidence from that outing. After that, you saw Bryce Collins, and he looks like he's slowly turning the corner to get back into his 2022 form, which the Tigers desperately need moving forward as they hit the meat of the SEC schedule. Collins threw well with 1+ innings pitched and 2 Ks for him on the night. Then you saw freshman Micah Bucknam come in, and you see him kind of come in late during midweek games. And I think he has a really bright future ahead of himself as he throws 2/3 of an innings with 2 Ks. Now, when you look at the hitters, it took them a little while to get going, but once they got going, Nicholls State pitching staff had no chance. Gavin Dugas went off as he went 3 for 3 with a double, a single, and then a triple as he missed a home run by 2 feet, and he had 3 RBIs on the night. And then you saw Tommy Tanks get into it as Tanks hits 2 massive bombs with 5 RBIs on the night. And not to be outdone, Jared Bear Jones hits a massive ball off the scoreboard as he hits a home run on the night as well. Milazzo got the start, which is no surprise since Neal caught all 3 games this weekend. Kling got the start, and unfortunately, we saw the end to Dylan Cruz's 26-game hitting streak. But all in all, LSU did what they were supposed to do. They win another midweek game via the 10-run rule as they put away the Colonels 12-2. Now, one thing that did come out after the game that Leah Van, who is the beat writer for The Advocate, that Leah Van shared on her Twitter account is that Jay Johnson stated that Chase Shores will not pitch this weekend. He is undergoing a medical evaluation, and I will not speculate out of respect for that young man and his family and out of respect for Jay Johnson and the program. So we will just leave it at that. Hopefully Chase Shores is okay, but if it's worst case scenario, that means more guys have to step up in the pen, specifically Little and Hurd. Collins has to keep performing. Griffin Herring, I'm sure, is going to take on a bigger role now. And then what's going to happen with Gavin Guidry as well. But We just hope Chase Shores is okay. He's got a fabulous future in front of him, and we pray that nothing is too bad for that young man. All right, next we had the South Carolina preview with my buddy AJ Sessions as he breaks down all things Gamecocks coming up. Stay tuned. I hope you enjoy the preview. All right, so it's the SEC, and that means another top 10 matchup for LSU as they travel to Founders Park in Columbia, South Carolina to take on the 6th-ranked South Carolina Gamecocks. That may be a surprise to some of y'all, but if you caught my SEC preview podcast and when I did the South Carolina preview, they were actually my dark horse to finish 3rd in the SEC East, and they've gotten off to an amazing start as they are 8-1 in SEC conference play. But let me welcome in the South Carolina expert here to break down everything you want to know about the Gamecocks is AJ Sessions. AJ, thanks for joining me, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, you got it. Thank you for your time. And so, AJ, before we just start jumping into the series and breaking everything down, hitters, pitchers, key players for these LSU fans to know, why don't you tell everybody where they can find all of your content and what you're involved in?
So I'm a writer for College Baseball Central. We cover basically as much college baseball as we can across the country. I specifically cover South Carolina and Carolina-based schools. We also have a show every Saturday morning called The Weekend Rotation, where we recap Friday's action and then preview the rest of the weekend series. So come check us out. It's kind of like College Game Day, but for baseball.
There you go. And I can attest to that. Those guys do a great job. I had Mark Garland, who's also part of that collaboration with AJ. He did the Pac-12 preview for me this year. And then obviously y'all know Alex Day, who's a frequent contributor here at the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU podcast, as he is an LSU fan based out of Austin. And Alex has joined me on several things. All right, AJ, so let's get into it. So coming into the weekend, South Carolina, at the time of this recording now, there's games going on right now, as we talked about off air. But South Carolina's 26-3 with an 8-1 record in the SEC, having just took 2 out of 3 on the road in Starkville for Mississippi State. But already South Carolina has swept Georgia and Mizzou. When you look at LSU's 24-4 at the time of this recording, 6-3 in SEC play after having just taken 2 out of 3 games from Tennessee. As I mentioned, South Carolina is number 6 in the country. They were ranked number 3 in one poll, and LSU continues to remain the consensus number 1 team in the country. All right, so AJ, heading into the season, I mentioned I had USC as my dark horse. I picked them to finish 3rd behind Tennessee and Florida. But what were your expectations for South Carolina heading into the 2023 season?
My expectations as a fan are slightly different than me as an analyst. As a fan, it was super regionals or bust. That was very much the vibe. We finally have a healthy pitching staff, and I think there was a lot of expectation of that's where the team is going to need to win, is on the mound. There wasn't a lot expected from the hitters. Yes, we got some guys in from the portal, but those guys don't always turn out. You're not going to have very many Sonny DeSheras coming in from smaller schools. And even the guys who transferred from bigger schools, if they got injury issues, there's no guarantee that those guys are going to produce. So it was, pitching is going to win games. You're going to lean on our starters. And then, I couldn't have imagined this start, if I'm being perfectly honest. I was hoping to win these first 3 series, but to sweep 2 of them and then win the 3rd, for me, that's the best possible start, because the next stretch for South Carolina, starting with this LSU series, is really the meat of SEC play for them.
Yeah, and I think you see that with a lot of the SEC East teams where they've kind of beaten up on some really bad SEC West competition, and really LSU has kind of really almost finished their toughest stretch when you look at A&M, Arkansas, and Tennessee. But obviously, my fan base, all LSU fans here, just give them a quick synopsis of the South Carolina season really up until this point, maybe a little bit of non-conference, and then who they had a chance to play in SEC competition so far.
Okay, so I guess starting out the year, we rolled through some fairly weak non-conference opponents to open out the year. UMass Lowell rolled through them. Penn is a good team, but South Carolina just outclassed them. It was Penn's opening week, the second weekend, and it was just too much pitching, too much offense. And then basically you couldn't stop the bats. You haven't been able to stop the South Carolina bats all year. They lead the nation in home runs, and that was something that's completely come out of the blue. Will Sanders has been struggling a little bit. He doesn't give up a lot of hits, but the ones he does give up are loud contact, and being a fly ball pitcher, that means home runs. And so he hasn't been able to keep his ERA down. He actually has the highest ERA on the team of pitchers who have at least 10 innings pitched, which is not what you would expect from a guy who was a consensus first round prospect. Yeah. But the rest of the staff has been absolutely dominant. Noah Hall has been dominant. Jack Mahoney, working back from Tommy John, has been fantastic. There's just really not been a weak spot to attack on South Carolina all year.
Yeah. And you mentioned him a second ago, but that's one of the things in preparing for your interview and then some of the other parts of the podcast and looking at South Carolina. Let's talk about their hitters first, and you touched on it. When I did the preview, I really focused on Braylen Wimmer. I liked him coming back a lot, y'all shortstop. And then Caleb Denny was a transfer who I talked about. And I thought y'all had some experienced pieces coming back to surround those two guys. But, man, when I look at some of those numbers, I'll be honest, and you touched on it very briefly, but I want you to expand. I did not expect any of this. So let me just throw out some numbers for you, and then I'm going to let you really dive into those hitters. South Carolina, as you mentioned, they lead the country in home runs. They have 72. And obviously they lead the country in home runs per game. The hitters are third in the country in terms of walks, fifth in the country in slugging percentage, fifth in the country in runs per game, seventh in the country in on-base percentage. And for the LSU fans, LSU is ahead of them in all those categories except for home runs. But needless to say, both these teams can swing it. So, AJ, if you could, man, talk about some of those hitters. And you touched on it, but really give these LSU fans an idea of some of those surprises that you were talking about. And if you don't mention them, then I'll definitely mention them. But I'll let you – you're the expert here on that lineup. But why don't you talk about some of those guys that are swinging the sticks this year?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Braylen Wimmer, and he's kind of locked in the leadoff spot right now. He's been great table setter at the top of the lineup. Power speed combination, just deadly. He led off 2 of the 3 games at Mississippi State with the first pitch bomb oppo. And then batting second, we got Gavin Casas, who probably has the most power on the team. I think he's up to I think he's got 13 home runs so far this year.
I got him at 15. 15.
Got him at 15. Sorry, I mixed him up with the other guy.
Oh yeah, you get to him in a second.
Yeah. But Gavin Casas, and he's hitting for power and average. He's hitting over 300. Does swing and miss a bit, but when he barrels one up, you don't need to really watch the ball go. You just watch Gavin just stand at the plate and watch. I mean, he has been on fire. And then really the freshman phenom, Ethan Petry, who's been – I don't think it's arguably – I think he's been the best freshman in baseball so far this year. He's hitting in the 440s. He's got 13 home runs, and he wasn't even starting opening day. The only reason he got a bat the first day was because South Carolina was run ruling UMass Lowell, and so they just got the freshman in at bat. And you can never expect that. You can never expect a freshman to come in and do what he's doing. And then you just have pieces who matured from last year. Cole Messina didn't have a home run last year. Talmadge Lecoy didn't have a home run last year. And both of those guys are getting on base at an absurd clip. Cole Messina is hitting for power and playing a great catcher. Talmadge Lecoy, who is also a catcher, has learned third base to play third base and still keep his bat in the lineup. It's been unreal. And then the outfield's probably been where there's been the most turnover. And that's because we have some guys like Evan Stone and Dylan Brewer who have the tools and are just kind of cycling through who's getting hot, who's staying hot. Caleb Denny's been going through a little bit of a funk, but there's a reason you mentioned him in the preseason preview of he's a good hitter. He's going to get it figured out. He's been clutch when he needs to be. And it's an experienced lineup. They see a lot of pitches. They're not going to help a pitcher out. Their strikeouts, they're going to strike out a lot, but that's because they're going to work counts. And they're going to get 3-2 counts. They're going to work 2 strike counts, and they're not afraid to hit with 2 strikes.
Yeah, that actually sounds just like LSU this year. If I were to talk about their lineup, minus some of the power numbers, that's what they do as a team, right? They stick to a plan. They work counts. They try to get the starters out. And as we talked about the walks, one thing I did notice, though, is that South Carolina, they walk a lot, but, man, they strike out a ton. It's kind of that new regime of baseball, right, where they're going to hit a bunch of bombs, but they're going to strike out a lot. and they lead the SEC in terms of strikeouts as a team by a lot. Has that been an issue? Is that cause for concern for the South Carolina fan base, or hasn't really stuck its ugly head out as of yet?
I think for a number of different reasons, you can probably say, depending on game to game, it hasn't been an issue. Strength of competition. Anytime you hit as many home runs as they do, you can afford to strike out a little bit. But there have been some games and some times where it's frustrating as a fan to watch and be like, okay, we just need a ball put in play here. It's a 1-run game, lead off double. I just get a guy over, and instead you get a strikeout. And then, if you get a lazy fly ball, and you're like, okay, well, that lazy fly ball would have been a sacrifice fly if the other guy just hit a ground ball to second base. So definitely some frustration there. But, when it comes down to it, and the example that I'm going to use is the Friday night game against Missouri. They were down 4 runs in the 9th and then had 1 ball leave the infield and managed to just small ball their way to a walk-off win. And so this team can knuckle down and have great at-bats and, not strike out. And when they need to, it's just that's not their default.
Gotcha. Now I've watched some cut-ups of South Carolina. It's kind of catching up on the weekends or on Mondays, just trying to pay attention to get to everybody's games wherever I can find them. Now, Founders looks small, and I put out there the other day on Twitter the dimensions just because it may have been when y'all played Clemson. I swear it seemed like every other ball was flying out the ballpark, and it looked like they were playing in a high school field. Obviously, they're not, but and maybe it was just that weekend or what. But I was like, good Lord, every ball is leaving the ballpark. It felt like. Does it play? It's smaller than LSU, but does it play really small, kind of like Tennessee does at times, or Alabama, or how does that play?
So I wouldn't say it's as bad as Tennessee.
Okay.
I've watched. I went to the regional last year, Tennessee's regional, and watched some of those balls leave that stadium, and there's just no reason some of those should have been home runs. But it's very much you get to the ballpark, and the first thing you do is you check the wind direction.
Really?
And if it's blowing out to right field, then you could soft toss a ball to yourself and hit one out opposite field to right field. It doesn't take much to get it out there. Center field, really, unless it's blowing straight out to center. But if you pull a ball and the wind's helping you at all, it's that ball travels. They're kind of jet streams because of the batter's eye and because of the scoreboard. It kind of funnels towards left field a little bit. Yeah. But definitely a hitter-friendly ballpark. It's a dangerous place to be a fly ball pitcher.
No, and I'm specifically thinking about the series is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I'm thinking about Friday and Saturday specifically. Skenes, I'm okay with Skenes. Good luck trying to hit him out, and you're gonna love. I know you're going to the games. You're gonna love watching Paul pitch, but it's gonna be interesting. They could have some serious runs put up, and LSU kind of needs to catch up in the home run race. So you touched on some of the starters, and I know there's been some changes with the South Carolina staff in terms of the weekend rotation that really started last weekend. So why don't you give LSU fans kind of a synopsis of who you think is going to pitch Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then after you do the weekend guys, I kind of outlined some bullpen guys, but I'm really interested to see who you think will play a big role in the bullpen. And also, look, I think I have to preface this for LSU fans. Do y'all have any lefties? It's a thing with the fan base. I didn't see any lefties, or maybe one or two, and one I think, like you said, is starting tonight for y'all.
Yeah, we have 2 lefties. Okay. Really one that we'll put out there in big situations, and he'll come out of the bullpen. But
there we go. Okay.
Outside of that, we have another lefty who will eat up innings, but that's about it.
All right. So who are the weekend guys that the LSU fans should be on the lookout for, and that are going to lead the charge for South Carolina this weekend?
So if you watched or if you kept up with South Carolina last week, you'll notice that Will Sander did not start last week. He was held out as kind of a mental reset, nothing injury-wise, just mental reset. So he's probably going to go either Thursday or Friday. And that hesitation is because Noah Hall, who has been the number 2 starter all season, he's dealing with a little bit of a back issue. So if he goes, then he will go in his normal number 2 slot, which will be Friday because of the Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. But if he does not go, then I believe you will see Eli Jones, who started last week in Will Sanders' spot, throw game 1, and then Will Sanders throw game 2. And that way he can be on his normal Friday rotation. And then next weekend, when we get back to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, get to a standard Friday and the week reset. Right. And then you'll see Jack Mahoney on game 3.
I got you.
And those will be your starters. And then out of the bullpen, it's kind of just they have so many weapons out there. It's hard to highlight a couple guys. They've gone to Chris Veach in the clutch when they need him. The freshman Austin Williamson has pitched some very big innings, especially in SEC play. He has pitched his way into a more pronounced role. Matthew Becker, the lefty, the one who's throwing tonight as we speak, he will definitely throw some this weekend. Mm-hmm. Cade Austin, who is a SEC All-Freshman last year, he's picking up exactly where he left off. None of these guys are really going to blow you away, but the off speed is plus, and and they don't throw anything straight. So there's no guy in that bullpen who is going to sit. I don't think there's a guy in the bullpen who will touch upper 90s, but LSU isn't going to see anything straight unless someone throws a flat changeup up in the zone or something.
Interesting, yeah, because we just came off the Tennessee series, and they run Dolander, and y'all are going to face these guys too. I don't have to tell you, Dolander, Burns, and Beam, and those guys are all 95 to 98 with plus secondary stuff. And then in the bullpen, y'all sound like South Carolina does, sound like they're just as deep as Tennessee. And LSU didn't really have get in their bullpen because they had guys when those guys replaced the starters, they went 3 or 4 innings and kind of finished the game out. So we didn't see a ton of their arms, and but obviously you'll have a bunch to throw out there. In terms of the weekend guys, though, when you look at Sanders or Hall, Mahoney, Jones, what kind of stuff do they offer? Obviously coming off the Tennessee series, can you give the LSU fans any type of preview? I guess maybe in terms of velocity or secondary stuff, or plus type pitches, something they can be on the lookout for.
Okay, so I'll pretend it's going Sanders, Hall, Mahoney, and run down like that. Will Sanders, he'll sit 92 to 94. He can run it up to 96. We saw him at 97 earlier on in the year, but I think that was just kind of an empty the tank early on kind of deal. Yeah. Good changeup when he keeps it down, as with all changeups. Right. And slider is a weapon to righties. He doesn't throw it much to lefties. He prefers that changeup. He will go right on right changeup, but only when he's had success with it early. Okay. That fastball can get flat if he leaves it at the top of the zone, if he tries to throw too hard, which is why I think he's been sitting in the lower to mid 90s range as opposed to try to pump up that velo. Noah Hall, he is 94 to 96 with a devastating changeup. He is it is probably the best changeup I've seen on this team. It's got velo, it's got movement, and it's the exact same arm speed as his fastball. He does have a curveball as well, just to keep hitters honest, keep them from keep lefties from leaning over, keep righties from sitting on a pitch coming into him. But he's got very good stuff. And then Mahoney, he is working on a changeup, doesn't really have that established yet. He threw it very successfully last weekend, but that was the first weekend he's really had success with it. But he is 94 to 97, two seam, and it runs. It really runs. He gets ground balls. He's the one ground ball pitcher on that staff, and then his slider is otherworldly. So if he can mix pitches, then there aren't going to be many comfortable at bats on both sides of the field at Founders this weekend.
Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of Chase Burns-esque sliders, which LSU saw a ton of. I mean, for the guy who throws 98 miles per hour, Burns throws like 65% sliders, which absolutely blew me away. and sliders coming in there at 90. So LSU has definitely seen their fair share of right-handed sliders this year. Obviously, they're going to have to deal with some more. And that'll be an interesting matchup with Noah Hall and the changeup and the ability, it sounds like, to throw the changeup any count, probably back it up. He'll back up changeups and then right on right changeup. So that could give LSU some issues, maybe 1.5 times through the order before they really get a handle on how good that is. Fielding percentage, LSU was atrocious last year. They're leading the country in fielding percentage. I looked up South Carolina's. They're 12th in the SEC at 974. Has that been an issue? Have y'all been snake bit? Is that a cause for concern coming into the weekend?
It's mostly been that weird, lack of focus at an end of a series, or that one or two fluke games where you look up and you have 3 errors. There haven't really been errors in big moments.
Okay.
So definitely, I can remember quite a few plays that I wish we should have made. But pitching has been able to minimize those. And a lot of them are, allowing a guy on base instead of, allowing, a drop fly ball. And then a guy's on second, or guy steals second and you throw it into center field and then he's on third. Not a lot of errors that compound. So South Carolina's gotten away with it, but it definitely could, can't give a team like LSU free outs.
No, yeah, they've done a really good job of scoring with 2 outs and then extending innings. I've really kind of focused on the podcast this year, just the ability to extend innings, 2-out hitting, to where they can string some things together. So starting to wrap up here with AJ Sessions breaking down South Carolina here on the 60 feet 6 inches LSU podcast. All right, AJ. So in order for South Carolina to have success this weekend, or if I talk to you on Sunday morning and South Carolina's taken 2 out of 3, what do they need to do well for them to win this series, in your opinion?
They'll definitely still need to hit the long ball. With LSU's pitching staff, you're not going to get a ton of good pitches to hit. And if you do, they're going to be at high velocity or a lot of movement that just end up in the middle of the plate. And you need to capitalize on those few pitches you get, and you need to drive them and do damage. So capitalize on the bad pitches. Can't give LSU free outs. You cannot have errors, especially towards the bottom half of LSU's lineup, where you get guys like Dylan Cruz and Dugas and those guys more at bats. You want to minimize their impact on the game as much as possible. So South Carolina has to put themselves in a position where they can afford not to let Dylan Cruz pitch around him. Don't let Dylan Cruz beat you, because he completely has that capability to do so. And then just fill up the strike zone with competitive strikes, not laying change-ups at the belt, but sticking to pitching to your strengths as opposed to the batter's weaknesses. I think that our pitching staffs of past years have been trying to, okay, what's the scouting report to the hitters and channel there, as opposed to guys now are just, where do I succeed as a pitcher? My stuff's better than the hitter, and trusting it.
Yeah. No doubt. It's going to be a great series. It's going to be interesting. It looks like they may have some weather over there. So I'm hoping that they can get all the games in 9 innings. I think if for some reason they have to go with 2 7s, and I've kind of thought about that in the preview podcast. If they have to go with 2 7s, that's going to change the dynamic completely.
Yeah,
especially from LSU's perspective with regards to the third starter and then the pin. There's just some question marks in terms of who they roll out there, and obviously 7 inning games really changes the dynamic. But AJ, I appreciate your time, but I can't let you get out of here without giving me. Let you give me a prediction. What do you think is going to happen this weekend in Columbia?
What do I think is going to happen? I think we're going to see a surprisingly low-scoring series between the two. Okay. I think the offenses are coming in, both so much power, so much potential in both offenses. But I think for both pitching staffs, this is going to be a kind of a nut up weekend for them. And Paul Skenes going on the road against a team who's leading the nation in home runs. I think he wants to prove that he can shut them down. I think you're going to see Will Sanders back, trying to prove that he is a different pitcher than who he's been at the start of the year. I think it's going to be a very relatively low scoring series. Um, I that this is my bias leaking through, but I think South Carolina is going to win 2 of 3. Um, it'll be tough to beat Skenes.
Yeah.
If you're going to win that game, I don't think you're going to beat him. I think you're going to beat the bullpen who comes in after him.
Yeah, a la Arkansas, to where you just try to drag it out and you hold on, and in the eighth you're looking at 1-1 or 2-2 type game. No, I hear you. It's you're gonna like watching him pitch, and he gets jacked up. He feeds off that emotion, so I'm sure Founders will be packed. Hopefully the weather be good Thursday, and yeah, you're gonna see some 101s popping. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. But AJ, I appreciate your time, man. I really appreciate the outstanding insight into South Carolina. For the viewers and listeners out there, I'll have all of AJ's stuff tagged on the Twitter account. Make sure to check him out at College Baseball Central on the Weekend Rotation podcast. AJ, thanks for your time, man, and enjoy your time out there at the ballpark.
Thank you.
All right, y'all stay tuned for my predictions coming up next. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed AJ breaking down South Carolina. I thought he did an excellent job talking about the hitters, the ballpark, and the pitchers, and really a great scouting report for LSU fans on what to look for Thursday, Friday, Saturday from the Gamecocks, as they are a top 10 team. They beat North Carolina tonight, so they are absolutely rolling as the top-ranked Tigers come into town, and I'm sure Founders Park will be absolutely slammed this weekend. Hopefully the weather doesn't cause too many problems. All right, let's get into it. What are my 3 keys for the weekend? South Carolina is the nation's leader in home runs. So my first key, the LSU pitching staff has to keep South Carolina's hitters in the yard, meaning those guys cannot go nuts this weekend and hit 5 to 7 home runs in that park, in that crowd, and get those guys riled up. We talked with AJ about how that ballpark is small, how it plays shorter than LSU's ballpark. Look, it's 325 down the lines, 390 in dead center, but kind of on the edges of center field, it's 380. So those alleys are going to play probably very short. And as AJ talked about, that wind could be gusting out to where just a pop-up gets out of right field. And who knows, some balls are probably going to go out of there that wouldn't go out of Alec Box Stadium. But the key for the pitchers, they have got to keep the ball down. If they do elevate, it has to be elevated with a purpose. You have to get the ball up around their letters or their hands. You cannot just let balls sit in there in hitters counts, center cut fastballs, as they can elevate and get those balls out of the ballpark. The second key to the weekend is I really think LSU needs to have a big power weekend. They need to have a big bounce back weekend from a home run perspective. Last weekend was tough, facing 3 future big league pitchers in Dolander, Burns, and Beam. But LSU handled those guys very well. But the Tigers only hit 3 home runs all weekend with 2 from Dugas and 1 from Neal. So I really look for Cruz, Tanks, Jones, and possibly Joe Bear or Pearson to get a couple this weekend and set the tone from the jump. As you can see tonight, Tanks and Jones got a head start on that. So I really want to see the Tigers' home run numbers increase. And I would imagine with the teams that LSU is getting ready to face in SEC play, and some of those teams have horrible team ERAs when you're talking about Auburn, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Georgia has another, they can hit, but they have a terrible team ERA. So I'd expect LSU's power numbers to go up as it gets hotter in Baton Rouge. We know the ball flies out the box, but this is a great weekend to where they could put 7, 8 home runs and send a message to the rest of the country. Finally, my third key for the weekend. This is a little odd, but I think this could play a big factor in this weekend. How does the weather potentially affect the pitching staff on Friday and potentially Saturday night? I just looked at the forecast before recording this. Thursday looks great. I'm sure it's going to be packed for the Skenes outing. Friday, about a 60 to 70% chance of rain. And then Saturday is like 90% chance. And obviously Sunday's Easter Sunday. Hopefully don't have to stay over and play that, but that's also like a 90% chance of rain. Should they potentially move up the Saturday game to Friday and try to fit in a double header? And y'all may think it's just a little thing, but if they have to play 2 7-inning games, that completely changes everything, especially from a pitching perspective. Think about it. You're going to start Floyd. Jay Johnson already said that. But if it's a 7-inning game on Friday night, then, or say Friday night's an issue, maybe they try to squeeze in 2 on Saturday, then who do you start? Do you look at starting Garrett Edwards since you know he can go forward? He has been lights out this year. Do you look at starting Griffin Herring? I've mentioned that I can't wait to see him start in the SEC, but I'd rather be at home to where he's comfortable. He knows the mound, the crowd's on his side, as opposed to being on the road at the number 6 team in the country's home ballpark. So there's a lot of different things. You obviously could start Christian Little and give him 2 or 3 innings, and you have Garrett Edwards potentially to back him up. But I'm telling y'all, if weather plays an issue, I think that's really going to mess, not necessarily with the hitters, that's going to mess with the pitching rotation. And Jay and Wes Johnson are going to really have to figure out some type of a plan, because I'll tell you what, those games go by very quickly, and one big inning can absolutely change the series. All right, who makes the get right, stay right list this weekend for me against South Carolina? First off, get right, Cade Beloso. Look, there's going to be a ton of right-handed pitching for the Gamecocks this weekend. We saw Beloso play last weekend. I think the old Creole Bambino could be a big part of LSU once again this weekend. Against the Vols, Cade was 1 for 12 as he played in all 3 games. But if you go back before that, he was 2 for 3 versus Grambling in the midweek game with 4 RBIs as he hit a home run. And then he was 4 for 7 in the Arkansas series. So when I did those numbers, that's not terrible at all. All in all, it's 7 for 22, which is hitting 318. So why are you saying get right? Well, that did surprise me, but I still think he's my choice, because the Tennessee series, he did not look great, right? And I'm a huge fan of Cade's. I think he brings a ton to the table. I like him as a leader on this team. He always seems like he finds a way to get on base, to drive in runs, just to do little things to help the team. And I think he's the perfect bridge, really, when he hits in that 6 hole between the top of the order and then the bottom of the order, to where he can potentially extend innings, because we know he has power and he can hit the ball to all fields. So Cade Beloso, get right this weekend. Next up on the list is another left-handed hitter, JP, baby, Josh Pearson. So Pearson played in all 3 Arkansas games and 2 of the Tennessee games, where he went a combined 4 for 19, which is 211. So not great. On the year, Pearson is hitting 255 with only 1 home run and 51 ABs. And it's been a little stop and go, or stop and start for Pearson. It took him a little while to get in the lineup, then he got hot. He just kind of can't find his groove, and he can't just seem to stick into the lineup. Once again, a ton of right-handed pitching for South Carolina this weekend. And just like Beloso, I think Pearson is really a great bookend guy for Jared Jones. If you think about putting Pearson at 6, Jones in there, and then Beloso behind him, a great way to sandwich Jones in front of 2 guys, around 2 guys that can hit. And then obviously, Pearson provides a veteran presence, even though he's only a sophomore. He had a great year last year, and he does a lot of little things, right? He gets hit a ton. He can take a walk. So Pearson, I would love to see you get right this weekend in Columbia. Finally on the get right list, Christian Little. Look, he did start tonight against Nicholls. He threw well, but before that, you hadn't really seen him since that 2-inning stint versus Grambling. He did not throw in the Tennessee weekend. And then obviously against Arkansas, it wasn't great. It was pretty shaky, right? A third of an inning pitched, 3 hits, 4 runs against Arkansas. And I just have a feeling that Little is due, right? He's ready to get back to his dominant self. Just a little bit of a stretch there where he wasn't all the way on. He was missing some of his pitches, kind of some bad luck thrown in there, but he's too talented. I think he has the right mentality. And I think this may be a weekend on the road in that hostile environment to where Little feeds off that crowd. It gets him amped up, and Christian Little has a chance to get right this weekend. So who's on the stay right side? For me, look, you got to switch up the choices. I can always say Skenes, stay right, Cruz, Tanks. I tell y'all this all the time. So I try to always pick different guys. Look, I look at maybe somebody who's bursting onto the scene, or somebody who has just recently gotten hot again. And that's where the first guy on the stay right list comes in, and that is Trey Morgan. Trey is hitting over 400 in his last 7 games, not counting the Nicholls St game. And he absolutely went off the past 2 weekends. On the year, Morgan is hitting 327, only 2 home runs, but he only has 9 strikeouts with 13 walks. And I saw a stat today on NCAA stats to where I think he is the hardest person to strike out in the SEC, to where he only strikes out like 1 out of 11 ABs, which is right around maybe good for top 50 in the country. But that was a really cool stat that I picked up on. And I predicted Morgan, look, to hit double-digit home runs. I really thought he'd be around the 4 or 5 mark right now. He has plenty of time to make it up with some of the not great pitching staffs that LSU is about to face. But we know that he provides amazing protection for Cruz. He can get hit. He can take a walk. He can hit the ball in the gaps all day long, all parts of the field. Trey Morgan, continue to stay right, baby. The second guy on this list is a freshman left-handed pitcher, and Griffin Herring has been absolutely amazing his last two outings versus Arkansas, and then you saw him slam the door against Tennessee as he threw a scoreless eighth and ninth. 2 innings pitched, 4 Ks for that young man against the Vols. So South Carolina is a heavy right-handed hitting lineup, but to me, this kid can get out lefties or righties, and I think I think you'll see him in the pen again this weekend. The caveat could be is if it's a 7-inning doubleheader, do you see Herring start maybe the last game and try to get 3 innings out of him? Finally, on the stay right list, Ty Floyd. Now, I know what y'all are going to be saying. I know you're going to say, look, he should probably be on the get right list, Chris. We don't know how he's been. It definitely seems like Floyd splits opinion among the LSU fan base. But I think Floyd's going to stay right this weekend. Just hear me out. So on the year, Floyd has fabulous stats. You ready? 5-0, 2.87 ERA, a 164 batting average against, 36 Ks, 31 and a third innings pitched. But the number that really sticks out to me, and it could be a factor this weekend, Floyd has given up 6 home runs on the year. Founders Park is small, as we've already discussed multiple times. So Floyd kind of prone to give up the long ball, gave up 3 home runs against Tennessee, gave up another one against Arkansas. So Floyd just got to keep that fastball down in the zone. And look, when you look at his SEC numbers, they've been a little inconsistent. In SEC play, 4.91 ERA and 14 and 2/3 innings pitched, 5 walks, 15 Ks. But look, he has an explosive fastball. Everybody knows that. He has great rotation on the ball. He's going to sit 94 to 97 the whole game. He's got a good curveball, a good slider, and a good changeup. They're just not always working all at the same time. Obviously, he's most effective when he has some type of a secondary pitch, preferably some type of a breaking ball, really working. And it's not that he's just been scuffling a little bit, right? He hasn't had everything working all at once the last couple outings. So I think Ty Floyd stays right this weekend. I think he plays a massive role for the Tigers. And now, this is just me. Like, I threw with a ton of emotion. I didn't throw very hard, so I just had to do anything to get myself up and to try to trick these hitters. And Floyd is very stoic on the mound. And maybe that's just him. I know he's a massive competitor. Maybe he just doesn't like to show emotion on the mound, but I would love to see him throw just a little bit more emotion. Maybe a little more piss and vinegar. Maybe a little more Paul Skenes, like, get out of here motion. You see it every now and then, but I would just love to see Floyd get pissed off for 5 innings and just absolutely shove against South Carolina. But that may not be him. I don't know the young man, but still, I'm a massive Ty Floyd fan. All right, guys, series prediction time as we wrap up on the South Carolina preview here on the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU podcast. Now, look, I missed on my prediction last weekend as I chose to sweep. I know some people are like, how can you predict that? But look, sometimes crazy things happen in baseball. We had a chance. It just didn't work out for LSU on Saturday. This weekend, I've mentioned the weather. I think it could play a factor and could mess with the schedule. The good thing, though, I think is they have a ton of right-handed pitching. LSU hammers right-handed pitching. I know what AJ said in terms of these guys have very good stuff. They have a lot of movement. Guys coming out of the pen. They have a bunch of arms. You're not going to see the velocity that Tennessee brought to the table, but it sounds like all these guys have very good breaking balls or changeups, and they will throw them at any point in the count. But not really, I can't think of hardly any right-handed pitchers besides, I guess, Iowa's kid when it was 35 in Austin that really held this LSU lineup down. And it's tough when they see you for the second time, much less a third time. So I just don't see South Carolina's pitching staff holding LSU down all weekend. Would a sweep versus the number 6 team in the country on the road be massive? Hell yes, that would be massive, but I can't go there. LSU's had the opportunity to sweep against A&M, against Tennessee, and just couldn't get it done. And I just can't see myself pulling the trigger on the road. The only caveat, my only out is if they have a doubleheader on Friday or a doubleheader on Saturday with 2 7-inning games. As I mentioned, 1 inning, 1 3-run outburst can turn that game around. Coaches have a quicker hook to the pen, knowing they don't have as many innings to work around. They will pull guys in, play situations, sack bunt, do different things they're not used to because the game absolutely flies by. So I could see a sweep, or if LSU's leaving the ball up and South Carolina's going nuts in Founders Park and hitting bombs all over the place LSU could find themselves on the end of a series loss, dropping 2 out of 3 games. But right now, I'm going to stick with my Tigers. My long-winded answer to the prediction, LSU takes 2 out of 3 on the road and secures another top 10 series victory versus a very good South Carolina Gamecock baseball team. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for this week's 60 feet, 6 inches LSU versus South Carolina preview pod, as we went over a little bit of the Nicholls State game in which LSU won tonight 12-2. I want to thank AJ Sessions from College Baseball Central and the Weekend Rotation podcast for joining me. He did a great job giving you just a complete scouting report on everything that is South Carolina baseball, their hitters, their pitchers, why they've been so successful this season. And if you haven't checked him out or haven't checked out the Weekend Rotation or College Baseball Central, I'll tag all their stuff in my post. Go check those guys out. They do a great job of giving you a preview of college baseball around the country. If you don't have time to sit there and watch clips or to check every score, those guys do a great job Saturday mornings. Go check them out. Thank y'all for tuning in. As always, reminder, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you miss any content. Follow me and interact with me on Twitter. I'm always trying to send out replies when people tweet at me. And y'all know this podcast will be available on Google, Spotify, Apple, all the other major audio platforms. Next up, South Carolina Review Podcast. Now, look, Sunday is Easter, and depending on the schedule, I may try to squeeze in a live stream after the Saturday game, depending on the schedule. If not, it will just be a solo review podcast with yours truly, releasing that on Sunday for y'all. Just stay tuned for details on the Twitter account. So until next time, y'all stay safe, and as always, go Tigers.